The crack of a gunshot split the air over Bentonville, Arkansas, in 1875, followed by the unmistakable sound of a tin can being sent flying into oblivion. Violet Ashcroft lowered her Colt revolver with practiced ease, her steady hand never wavering as she blew a wisp of gunsmoke from the barrel. A crowd of men stood in stunned silence, their own firearms still holstered, as the slender woman with fiery amber eyes and chestnut hair tucked neatly beneath her wide-brimmed hat outdid them yet again. "That's 15 in a row, gentlemen," Violet announced, her voice carrying across the makeshift shooting range at the edge of town. "Anyone care to challenge the record?" The men shuffled their boots in the dust, exchanging glances that mixed admiration with wounded pride. This wasn't the first time Violet had bested them, and it surely wouldn't be the last. She'd been outgunning the men of Bentonville since she was 18, and now at 23, her reputation stretched across the county. Among the onlookers stood a tall figure who hadn't been there before. Nathan Xavier watched from beneath the shadow of his black Stetson, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the woman who handled a firearm with more skill than any man he'd ever encountered. Having just ridden into town that morning, he hadn't expected to witness such a display of marksmanship, especially not from someone who defied every notion he had about proper womanhood. "Ain't you gonna give it a try, stranger?" called out a burly man with a thick beard. "Or are you afraid to be shown up by a lady?" Nathan's weathered face remained impassive as he stepped forward, removing his riding gloves. At 30 years old, he'd spent half his life on horseback, driving cattle across the Western Territories. His reputation as one of the finest shots in the Texas Panhandle had preceded him in many towns, but here in Bentonville, he was just another anonymous cowboy passing through. "I don't usually shoot for entertainment," he replied, his voice low and measured. "But I suppose there's a first time for everything." Violet turned to face him, sizing up the newcomer with a practiced eye. His clothes were trail-worn but well-kept, his stance confident without being cocky. The gun belt around his waist was positioned for function rather than show the mark of a man who carried a weapon out of necessity, not vanity. "The challenge is simple," she explained, reloading her revolver with swift, practiced movements. 6 cans, 6 shots, fastest time wins." She gestured to the line of cans perched on fence posts about 30 yards away. Nathan nodded, drawing his Remington with fluid grace. "Ladies first," he offered. A smile played at the corners of Violet's mouth. "Age before beauty," she countered, earning a ripple of laughter from the crowd. For the briefest moment, Nathan's stoic expression cracked with the hint of a smile. He tipped his hat and took his position. "On my count," called the bearded man. 3, 2, 1, fire." Nathan's hand moved like lightning. 6 shots rang out in such rapid succession, they almost blended together. 6 cans flew from their posts, dancing in the air before clattering to the ground. Approving murmurs swept through the gathering. It was an impressive display, perhaps the fastest they'd seen from any challenger to date. 12 seconds, announced the timekeeper, a gray-haired man with a pocket watch. Nathan holstered his gun and stepped back, giving Violet a respectful nod. There was no smugness in his demeanor, just the quiet confidence of a man who knew his skill. Violet stepped up to the mark after the cans had been replaced. She took a deep breath, centered herself, and waited for the count. 3, 2, 1, fire. Her movements were poetry, economical, precise, and devastatingly effective. The Colt in her hand seemed an extension of her arm as she fired in a smooth rhythm. 6 cans sailed into the air. 10 seconds, the timekeeper declared with a hint of pride in his voice. The crowd erupted in cheers and whistles. Violet gave a modest smile and holstered her weapon, then turned to Nathan with an extended hand. "Violet Ashcroft," she introduced herself. "Welcome to Bentonville." Nathan took her hand, surprised by the firmness of her grip. "Nathan Xavier," he replied. "That was some of the finest shooting I've ever seen, Miss Ashcroft." "Violet, please," she insisted. "And you're not so bad yourself. Most men who ride through can't hit the broad side of a barn, let alone 6 cans in 12 seconds. Something shifted in Nathan's chest as he looked into her amber eyes, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, if ever. It wasn't just admiration for her skill, though that was certainly part of it. There was something about the way she carried herself, confident but not arrogant, skilled but humble. "What brings you to our little corner of Arkansas, Mr. Xavier?" Violet asked as the crowd began to disperse, the entertainment concluded for the day. "Nathan," he corrected with a slight inclination of his head. "I'm delivering a herd to the Wilson Ranch. Cattle drive up from Texas." He hesitated, then added, "I didn't expect to find such remarkable talent in these parts." Violet's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Most don't," she admitted. "My father was the sheriff here for 20 years before he passed. He believed every person, regardless of their sex, should know how to handle a firearm. Said it was the great equalizer. Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," she agreed, a shadow of grief briefly dimming her features. "Been gone 3 years now. I keep his memory alive by practicing what he taught me." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken by the distant sound of the town church bell tolling the hour. "I should be getting back," Violet said, adjusting her hat against the afternoon sun. "My mother will be expecting me to help with supper." Nathan found himself reluctant to end their conversation. "Perhaps I'll see you around town, Violet. I'll be here for a few days while the herd rests." "Count on it," she replied with a smile that warmed him more than the Arkansas sun. "We have a shooting competition every Saturday at noon. You should enter." "I might just do that," he said, watching as she walked away, her stride confident and unhurried. The bearded man who had called Nathan out earlier sidled up beside him. "I wouldn't get too attached, Cowboy," he warned. "Half the men in this county have tried courting Violet Ashcroft. She ain't interested in being any man's wife." Nathan kept his eyes on Violet's retreating figure. "I wasn't planning on proposing, friend, just appreciating fine marksmanship when I see it." The man chuckled knowingly. "That's how it starts. Then before you know it, you're standing there like a fool with flowers in one hand and a broken heart in the other." "Speaking from experience?" Nathan asked with a raised eyebrow. "Let's just say I've seen it happen more times than I can count," the man replied, extending his hand. "Frank Murphy, by the way. I own the saloon in town." Nathan shook his hand firmly. "Pleasure. Come by for a drink tonight," Frank offered. "First one's on the house for any man brave enough to challenge Violet Ashcroft." Nathan tipped his hat in acknowledgement. "Much obliged." As he walked back toward the livery stable where he'd left his horse, Nathan couldn't shake the image of Violet's steady hand on her revolver, the confidence in her amber eyes, the slight smile that had played across her lips as she outdrew him. In all his years on the trail, he'd never met anyone quite like her. And despite the warning from Frank Murphy, Nathan Xavier found himself looking forward to seeing Violet Ashcroft again, perhaps even more than he should. The Lazy Dog Saloon was the beating heart of Bentonville after sundown. Oil lamps cast a warm glow over the rough-hewn tables and bar, where cowboys, farmers, and townspeople gathered to wash away the dust of the day with whiskey and conversation. A piano player in the corner pounded out a lively tune, occasionally drowned out by bursts of laughter or heated debate. Nathan entered just after 8 o'clock, having seen to his horse and secured a room at the boarding house across the street. He changed his trail-worn shirt for a cleaner one, though he kept his gun belt buckled securely around his waist, a habit born from years of caution. Frank Murphy spotted him immediately from behind the bar and waved him over. "Glad you could make it, Xavier," he boomed, pouring a shot of amber liquid. "As promised, first one's on the house." Nathan accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. "Quiet night?" he asked, surveying the room. "It was busy but not rowdy, a good sign." "For now," Frank replied with a knowing smile. "Wait till the boys from the lumber mill finish their shift at 9, then things get interesting." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Violet's brother works there, protective as a mama bear, that one. Vincent Ashcroft has broken more noses defending his sister's honor than I can count." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't sound like she needs much defending from what I saw today," Frank laughed. "True enough, but Vincent doesn't see it that way. To him, she's still his little sister who needs looking after." He refilled Nathan's glass, this time pushing away the offered payment. "This one's on me too. I like a man who recognizes quality when he sees it." "I appreciate good skill with a firearm, that's all," Nathan insisted, though even as he said it, he knew there was more to his interest in Violet than mere professional admiration. Sure, Frank said with a knowing wink. "And I'm just running a temperance meeting here." The saloon door swung open, and a hush fell over the room as Violet Ashcroft stepped inside. She'd changed from her earlier attire into a simple blue dress that complemented her chestnut hair, now flowing freely past her shoulders. Her revolver was still holstered at her side, a stark contrast to the otherwise conventional feminine appearance. She nodded politely to the patrons as she made her way to the bar, most of whom greeted her with respect, rather than the leers that often followed a woman into such establishments. It was clear she commanded a unique position in the social hierarchy of Bentonville. "Evening, Frank," she said, reaching the bar. "Has Mrs. Murphy finished that book I lent her?" "Not yet," Frank replied warmly. "Says it's too good to rush through, something about a detective in London." "Sherlock Holmes," Violet confirmed with a smile. "I thought she might enjoy it." Her eyes shifted to Nathan, recognition and something else flickering in their amber depths. "Mr. Xavier, I see you found our local watering hole." "Miss Ashcroft," Nathan greeted, tipping his glass slightly in her direction. "Frank here was kind enough to invite me." "And generous enough to provide refreshment, I see," she noted, eyeing his drink. Frank placed a small glass of sherry before her without being asked. "The usual, Violet." "And before you start, yes, I'll put it on your tab as always." "Thank you, Frank," she said, taking a sip. To Nathan, she explained, "I come by once a week to exchange books with Mrs. Murphy and have a single glass of sherry. It's quite the scandal in certain circles." "I imagine breathing is a scandal in certain circles," Nathan remarked dryly, earning a genuine laugh from Violet. "You might be right about that," she agreed, her eyes twinkling. "So tell me, Nathan Xavier, what's life like driving cattle from Texas?" For the next hour, they conversed easily, Nathan sharing stories from the trail and Violet speaking of life in Bentonville. He learned that she helped run her family's general store, that she had a passion for literature as well as firearms, and that she'd once traveled as far as St. Louis for a shooting exhibition. "They weren't pleased when I won," she confided. "The organizer tried to disqualify me on account of my being a woman, said it wasn't proper for a lady to participate in such events." "What did you do?" Nathan asked, genuinely intrigued. A mischievous smile spread across her face. "I challenged him to match my score. When he couldn't come close, the crowd insisted I receive my rightful prize." She shrugged modestly. "It was only a small silver cup, but I treasure it all the same." The saloon had grown more crowded as they talked, the noise level rising with each new arrival. Suddenly, the doors burst open again, and a group of boisterous men entered, still in their work clothes and covered in sawdust. "That would be the lumber mill crew," Violet said with a slight sigh. She finished her sherry and stood. "I should be going. My brother's among them, and while I love Vincent dearly, his protective instincts can be overwhelming." Nathan rose as well, his manners automatic. "May I walk you home? It's getting dark." She gave him an appraising look. "I'm perfectly capable of seeing myself home safely, Mr. Xavier." "I don't doubt it for a second," he replied earnestly. "Consider it a selfish request. I'd welcome the opportunity to continue our conversation." Violet seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. "Very well. But I should warn you, if Vincent spots us, he's likely to have questions." "I can answer honestly that I'm merely escorting a lady home after an enjoyable conversation," Nathan assured her. They slipped out of the saloon just as a loud call of "Violet" came from the direction of the newly arrived lumber workers. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing after the smoky interior of the Lazy Dog. Stars dotted the clear sky above Bentonville, and the streets were quiet save for the muffled sounds spilling from various establishments. "This way," Violet directed, leading Nathan down the main street toward the residential area. "Our house is just behind the general store." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before Violet spoke again. "You never did say how long you'll be staying in Bentonville." "A week, perhaps a bit longer," Nathan replied. "Depends on how quickly the cattle recover from the drive and how soon Mr. Wilson wants to move them to his north pasture." "The Wilson Ranch is quite impressive," Violet commented. "Old man Wilson started with nothing 30 years ago. Now he owns half the county." "Hard work and determination can take a person far," Nathan observed. "Yes," she agreed, "though it doesn't hurt to have been born a white man in America." There was no bitterness in her tone, just a matter-of-fact acknowledgement of reality. Nathan glanced at her with newfound respect. Most women of his acquaintance didn't speak so plainly about such matters. "You make a fair point," he conceded. "The world isn't always equitable in the opportunities it provides." "Which is why I believe in creating my own opportunities," Violet stated firmly. "My father understood that. He taught me to shoot not just for protection, but as a reminder that skill knows no gender." They reached a modest 2-story house connected to a wooden storefront with Ashcroft General Mercantile painted across its sign. A lantern glowed in the downstairs window, casting a warm rectangle of light onto the porch. "This is me," Violet said, pausing at the gate. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Xavier, unnecessary though it may have been." "Nathan," he reminded her gently, "and it was my pleasure." She studied him for a moment in the moonlight, her expression thoughtful. "You're different from most cowboys who pass through Bentonville." "How so?" "You actually listen when I speak," she said with a small smile. "And you didn't once suggest that my skill with a gun was some kind of peculiar anomaly that needed explaining." Nathan returned her smile. "Perhaps I'm simply more observant than most. Or perhaps I've learned that underestimating people based on appearances is a good way to find yourself at a disadvantage." "A wise philosophy," Violet acknowledged. "Well then, Nathan Xavier, will I see you at the shooting competition on Saturday?" "I wouldn't miss it," he assured her. She opened the gate and stepped through. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night, Violet." As he watched her disappear into the house, Nathan realized he was already looking forward to Saturday with an eagerness that surprised him. In just one day, Violet Ashcroft had managed to intrigue him more than any woman he'd met in years of traveling the Western Territories. What began as admiration for her skill with a firearm was rapidly developing into something that both exhilarated and unsettled him. For a man accustomed to the transient nature of the cowboy life, the pull he felt toward staying in Bentonville was unfamiliar territory indeed. With a final glance at the now dark porch, Nathan turned and walked back toward the boarding house, his thoughts still filled with amber eyes and the steady hand that had outshot every man in town. The next few days passed in a rhythm that grew increasingly familiar to Nathan. Mornings were spent at the Wilson Ranch, helping the local hands move cattle to fresh pastures and mending sections of fence damaged during the recent spring floods. Afternoons often found him in town, restocking supplies or handling correspondence at the telegraph office. And each day, somehow, his path crossed with Violet's. Sometimes it was a brief encounter at the general store, where she worked alongside her mother, a gentle woman with the same amber eyes as her daughter but a more traditional outlook on a woman's place in society. Other times, he would spot Violet at the shooting range on the edge of town, practicing her already impressive marksmanship with methodical dedication. On Thursday afternoon, Nathan was leaving the bank when he heard raised voices from the alley beside the building. Instinctively, his hand moved to his revolver as he approached cautiously. "I said let go of my arm, Mr. Blackburn." Violet's voice was steady but edged with warning. "Come now, Violet, I'm merely offering to escort you to the town social," replied a male voice, smooth with practiced charm. "A beautiful woman shouldn't attend such events alone." "I've declined your invitation 3 times now," Violet stated firmly. "I won't repeat myself again." Nathan rounded the corner to see Violet facing a well-dressed man in his 30s, whose hand was gripping her upper arm with obvious force. Violet's free hand hovered near her holster, but she hadn't drawn her weapon yet. "Is there a problem here?" Nathan asked, his voice deliberately casual as he leaned against the wall, though his posture was anything but relaxed. The man Blackburn turned with an annoyed expression that quickly shifted to calculation when he saw Nathan's hand resting on his gun belt. He released Violet's arm and straightened his suit jacket. "No problem at all," he said smoothly. "Just a private conversation between old friends." "Didn't sound very friendly," Nathan observed, "or private, given how your voice carries." Violet's expression remained composed, though Nathan could see the anger flashing in her eyes. "Mr. Blackburn was just leaving," she said pointedly. Blackburn's smile didn't reach his eyes as he tipped his hat. "Another time, perhaps, Miss Ashcroft." He nodded stiffly to Nathan before walking away with exaggerated dignity. Once he was out of earshot, Violet rubbed her arm where his grip had left red marks. "Thank you for the interruption, though I had the situation under control." "I don't doubt it," Nathan replied honestly, "but I figured you might prefer not to shoot the bank manager in broad daylight. Tends to complicate one's banking relationships." A reluctant smile tugged at Violet's lips. "That's Russell Blackburn. He owns the bank, not just manages it, and he's convinced himself that I should be honored by his persistent attention." "Some men mistake persistence for courtship," Nathan observed, falling into step beside her as she began walking back toward the main street. "And some mistake rejection for playing hard to get," Violet added with a sigh. "Blackburn can't seem to understand that when I say no, I mean no." "Has he bothered you like this before?" Violet shrugged, her expression growing guarded. "He's harmless, mostly. Just entitled and accustomed to getting what he wants." "That doesn't answer my question," Nathan pointed out gently. She glanced at him, seeming to weigh how much to share. "He's proposed marriage twice in the past year. Seems to think that because my father's gone and our store struggles sometimes, I should be grateful for his offer to rescue me from having to work for a living." Nathan felt a surge of indignation on her behalf. "And I take it you don't want to be rescued." "I'd rather earn my way than be kept," she replied with quiet dignity. "Besides, Russell Blackburn doesn't want a wife, he wants a trophy to display at social functions and a housekeeper to manage his home." They reached the general store, where Violet's mother could be seen through the window, arranging a display of fabric. Before entering, Violet turned to Nathan with a more genuine smile. "I really am grateful for your timely appearance, even if I could have handled Blackburn myself." "I know you could have," Nathan assured her, "but sometimes it's nice not to have to." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her eyes that made Nathan's heart beat a little faster. "Yes," she agreed softly, "sometimes it is." She hesitated, then added, "Are you still planning to attend the shooting competition on Saturday?" "Wouldn't miss it," he confirmed, "though I'm under no illusions about my chances of winning." Violet laughed, the sound clear and bright in the afternoon air. "At least you're realistic. Most men come believing they'll surely beat the little lady, right up until the moment they don't." "I've already seen what you can do," Nathan reminded her. "I'd be a fool to underestimate you twice." Their eyes held for a moment longer than was strictly proper, a current of understanding passing between them that had nothing to do with shooting competitions and everything to do with mutual respect, a rare commodity between a man and woman in 1875. "I should get inside," Violet said at last, breaking the spell. "Mother needs help with the new shipment of goods." "Of course," Nathan replied, tipping his hat. "Until Saturday, then." As he watched her disappear into the store, Nathan acknowledged to himself that what he felt for Violet Ashcroft had already grown beyond admiration, or even attraction. In just a few short days, this remarkable woman had begun to claim a piece of his heart, a heart he'd long believed was too committed to the wandering cowboy life to be given to anyone. The realization was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. Saturday dawned clear and warm, promising perfect conditions for the shooting competition. By mid-morning, a sizable crowd had gathered at the designated area on the outskirts of Bentonville, a natural clearing backed by a steep hillside that served as a safe backstop for stray bullets. Participants and spectators mingled, examining the various targets and obstacles that had been set up. This was no simple 10 can contest. The monthly competition involved multiple stages designed to test accuracy, speed, and adaptability. Wooden silhouettes of various sizes stood at different distances, some stationary and others rigged to move when a pulley was activated. Nathan arrived to find nearly 20 contestants already registered, most of them local men, but with a few visitors from neighboring towns. He paid his entry fee to Sheriff Thompson, a grizzled veteran of the war between the states who had replaced Violet's father. "Glad to have you joining us, Xavier," the sheriff said, making a note in his ledger. "Fair warning, though nobody's beaten Violet's score in over a year." "So I've heard," Nathan replied, scanning the crowd for her distinctive figure. "She's over by the rifle station," Thompson informed him, following his gaze. "Testing the sight on that Henry repeater of hers. Girl's as deadly with a long gun as she is with a revolver." Nathan nodded his thanks and made his way through the gathering toward the rifle range. He spotted Violet immediately, standing apart from the other competitors, focused intently on adjusting something on her rifle. She wore practical riding trousers and a fitted jacket over a white blouse, attire that would have raised eyebrows in most social settings but seemed perfectly appropriate for the occasion. She looked up as he approached, her face brightening. "You came," she stated, sounding pleased. "I said I would," he reminded her with a smile. "Impressive setup you have here. Who organizes all this?" "It was my father's project initially," she explained, running a loving hand along the barrel of her Henry rifle. "After he died, the sheriff and I kept it going. It draws quite a crowd, good for local businesses." Nathan noticed several disapproving glances directed their way from a group of well-dressed townspeople standing near the refreshment table. "Not everyone seems supportive," he observed quietly. Violet followed his gaze and sighed. "That would be the town council and their wives. They tolerate the competition because it brings in revenue, but they find my participation unseemly." She emphasized the last word with exaggerated propriety. "Their loss," Nathan commented. "They're missing the chance to appreciate extraordinary talent." A slight blush colored Violet's cheeks at the compliment. Before she could respond, a bell rang out, calling the contestants to gather for the rules explanation. "We should join the others," she said, securing her rifle and adjusting her gun belt. "Good luck, Nathan." "You too," he replied, "though I doubt you'll need it." The competition consisted of 5 stages, each testing different shooting skills. The first was straightforward target shooting with a revolver at stationary targets of decreasing size. The second involved moving targets, tin cans swinging on ropes at varying distances. The third required contestants to shoot from different positions, standing, kneeling, and prone. The fourth was speed-based, requiring 6 shots in the shortest possible time while maintaining accuracy. The fifth and final stage combined rifles and revolvers in a complex course that simulated hunting and self-defense scenarios. As expected, Violet dominated from the start. Her revolver work was flawless, each shot finding its mark with unerring precision. With the rifle, she was even more impressive, making shots that had the crowd gasping in appreciation. Nathan performed admirably as well, finishing each stage near the top of the rankings. His years on the frontier had made him proficient with firearms out of necessity, and his natural steadiness served him well. By the final stage, only he and Violet remained in serious contention for first place, with the next closest competitor a full 10 points behind. The crowd grew increasingly engaged as the 2 leaders navigated the final course, switching smoothly between rifle and revolver as they engaged targets at various distances. Nathan completed the course with what many considered a perfect run, earning enthusiastic applause. Then Violet stepped up. A hush fell over the gathering as she moved through the course with fluid grace, each shot precisely placed, each transition between weapons seamless. She finished with a display of skill that left even her harshest critics speechless, hitting 3 moving targets in rapid succession at a distance most men wouldn't attempt with a rifle, let alone a handgun. When the final scores were tallied, Violet had beaten Nathan by just 2 points, the closest anyone had come to her record in months. Sheriff Thompson announced the results to thunderous applause, presenting Violet with the small silver cup that served as the prize. As was tradition, she was expected to say a few words. "Thank you all for participating and supporting our monthly competition," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the field. "I'd especially like to acknowledge Mr. Nathan Xavier, whose skill with both revolver and rifle provided the greatest challenge I've faced in quite some time." She turned to Nathan with genuine respect in her eyes. "Would you honor us by saying a few words, Mr. Xavier?" Surprised by the invitation, Nathan stepped forward. He wasn't a man accustomed to public speaking, but he knew what needed to be said. "I've been fortunate enough to travel much of this country," he began, his deep voice steady despite his discomfort with being the center of attention. "And I can say without hesitation that Miss Ashcroft's marksmanship is unparalleled in my experience. Bentonville should be proud to count such talent among its citizens." He looked directly at the town council members as he continued. In my years on the frontier, I've learned that skill and courage recognize no boundaries of gender or background. Today was a privilege to witness. With a respectful nod to Violet, he stepped back, aware of the murmurs his words had provoked among the crowd. The sheriff quickly took control, announcing that refreshments were available and that the next competition would be held in 1 month's time. As the crowd dispersed, Violet approached Nathan, the silver cup cradled in her hands. "That was well said," she told him quietly. "Especially the part directed at Councilman Edwards and his cronies." "Was I that obvious?" Nathan asked with a wry smile. "Only to someone who's been fighting the same battle for years," she assured him. She hesitated, then asked, "Would you care to join my family for dinner this evening? My mother insists on celebrating my victories with a special meal, and I'd like you to come." The invitation caught Nathan off guard. In the week he'd known Violet, she'd never mentioned her home life beyond basic facts about her family. An invitation to dinner represented a significant step beyond their casual encounters around town. "I'd be honored," he accepted, suddenly aware of how much he wanted to know more about her life beyond the remarkable marksmanship that had first caught his attention. "Wonderful," she said, her smile warming her entire face. 7 o'clock at our home behind the store. Nothing fancy, just family." As they parted ways to help with the cleanup of the competition grounds, Nathan found himself contemplating the unexpected turn his stay in Bentonville had taken. What had begun as a routine cattle delivery had somehow led him to the most fascinating woman he'd ever encountered. And for the first time in years, the prospect of moving on to the next town filled him with reluctance rather than anticipation. The Ashcroft home was modest but welcoming, with simple furniture that showed signs of care and use. Family photographs lined the mantel above the stone fireplace, and bookshelves occupied much of the available wall space, evidence of Violet's professed love of reading. The dining room smelled of roast beef and fresh baked bread, making Nathan realize how long it had been since he'd enjoyed a proper home-cooked meal. Margaret Ashcroft, Violet's mother, greeted him warmly. She was a handsome woman in her 50s with silver threading through her chestnut hair, her manner gracious despite the obvious curiosity in her eyes. "We're so pleased you could join us, Mr. Xavier," she said, taking his hat and coat. "Violet has mentioned you several times this week." "Has she now?" Nathan replied with a glance at Violet, who was arranging flowers on the dining table and studiously avoiding his gaze. "All good things, I assure you," Margaret continued. "It's not often we have the opportunity to entertain someone who appreciates my daughter's unique talents." Before Nathan could respond, the back door opened, and a tall young man entered, wiping his hands on a cloth. Though he shared Violet's coloring, his build was more substantial, with broad shoulders developed by physical labor. "This must be the famous Nathan Xavier," he said, crossing the room with his hand extended. "Vincent Ashcroft, I understand you gave my sister a run for her money today." Nathan shook his hand firmly. "Your sister's reputation is well deserved. I was honored to compete against her." Vincent's handshake was perhaps a bit firmer than strictly necessary, his assessing gaze making it clear that he was taking the measure of the man who had been spending time with his sister. "Vincent manages the lumber mill for Mr. Wilson," Violet explained. "He's also insufferably protective, as you're no doubt experiencing firsthand." Vincent laughed, the sound remarkably similar to Violet's. "Someone has to look out for you, little sister." "I'm 23, hardly little anymore," she retorted, though there was affection beneath the exasperation. "And yet trouble still finds you with alarming regularity," Vincent countered, his tone light but with an undercurrent of genuine concern. Like that business with Blackburn yesterday. Nathan tensed slightly, wondering how much Vincent knew about the encounter in the alley. Violet shot her brother a warning look. "Ancient history," she said firmly, "and not appropriate dinner conversation." Margaret intervened smoothly. "Everything is ready. Shall we sit down before the food gets cold?" The meal was delicious tender roast beef with vegetables from the Ashcroft's garden, followed by apple pie that Margaret explained was made from their own orchard behind the house. The conversation flowed easily, with Vincent questioning Nathan about his experiences on cattle drives and Margaret sharing stories about Bentonville's history. Nathan found himself enjoying the simple family dynamic, so different from the solitary existence he'd grown accustomed to over the years. He watched how Violet interacted with her mother and brother, the teasing affection, the inside jokes, the comfortable silences that only close families can share. "So, Nathan," Margaret said as they finished their pie, "Violet tells me you'll be in Bentonville for another week or so." "That's the plan," he confirmed. "Depends on Mr. Wilson's needs and how quickly the cattle adjust to their new surroundings." And then, she pressed gently, Nathan was aware of Violet's gaze on him, though she pretended to be absorbed in her tea. "Then I head back to Texas, I suppose." "The ranch I work for has another herd that needs moving to Kansas." "The life of a cowboy," Vincent remarked, "always moving, never settling." There was no judgment in his voice, merely observation. "It suits some men," Nathan acknowledged. "The open country, the freedom to go where the work takes you." "And you?" Violet asked quietly. "Does it suit you?" Their eyes met across the table, and Nathan found himself answering with complete honesty. "It did, for a long time." Something shifted in Violet's expression, a softening, a question, perhaps a hope. But before the moment could develop further, a loud pounding on the front door broke the spell. Vincent rose with a frown. Who could that be at this hour? He strode to the door, the others following more slowly. When he opened it, Sheriff Thompson stood on the porch, his expression grave. "Evening, Ashcrofts," he said, tipping his hat. "Sorry to disturb your dinner." His eyes landed on Nathan. "Good that you're here too, Xavier. Saves me looking for you later." "What's happened, Sheriff?" Violet asked, stepping forward. Thompson sighed heavily. "Bank was robbed about an hour ago. Blackburn's been shot. He's alive, but in a bad way. Doc's with him now." "That's terrible," Margaret gasped. "Who would do such a thing?" 3 men, according to witnesses. "Strangers, rode in this afternoon." The sheriff turned to Nathan. "One of them was asking about a Texas cowboy at the livery stable earlier. Said his name was Decker. Mean anything to you, Xavier?" Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. "Wade Decker," Thompson nodded grimly. "That's the name he left at the hotel. You know him." "We have history," Nathan admitted reluctantly. "He worked the same ranch as me in Texas until last year when he was fired for stealing cattle. He blamed me for exposing him." "Well, he's made good on his threats then," Thompson said. "Before Blackburn lost consciousness, he said the leader claimed the robbery was a message for Xavier's woman." All eyes turned to Violet, who had gone pale but remained composed. "I'm hardly Mr. Xavier's woman," she stated firmly. "Decker wouldn't know that," Nathan said, his mind racing. "He must have seen us together in town and drawn his own conclusions." He turned to the sheriff. "This is my fault. I should have warned you there might be trouble following me." "You couldn't have known he'd track you here," Thompson replied, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "But now that he has, we need to decide what to do. He and his men rode out after the robbery, but they took the north road not away from town. I think they're planning to come back." "For what purpose?" Margaret asked, her voice tight with concern. To finish whatever message they started, Nathan answered grimly. He turned to Violet. I'm sorry to have brought this danger to your door. I should go after them, draw them away from Bentonville. And face 3 armed men alone. That's suicide, Violet objected. She's right, the sheriff agreed. We need a plan, not a sacrifice. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then continued. The town's annual spring dance is tomorrow night at the meeting hall. Everyone will be there, including my deputies. If Decker's planning something public to humiliate you or Miss Ashcroft, that would be the perfect opportunity. So we cancel the dance, Vincent suggested. And let these outlaws disrupt our entire town, Violet countered. No, we use it to our advantage, set a trap. Nathan looked at her with growing admiration and concern. What are you suggesting? Violet's amber eyes glinted with determination. If Decker wants to send a message through me, let him try. But we'll be ready. As the night deepened, the 5 of them, Nathan, Violet, Vincent, Sheriff Thompson, and the reluctant but resolute Margaret, formulated a plan to protect the town and end Decker's threat once and for all. The Bentonville Spring Dance was the social event of the season, drawing people from across the county to the town's meeting hall for an evening of music, dancing, and community celebration. By 7 o'clock the following evening, the large wooden building was festooned with fresh flowers and colorful ribbons, lanterns hanging from the rafters casting a warm glow over the assembled townspeople in their Sunday best. Nathan stood near the refreshment table, uncomfortable in the borrowed suit Vincent had insisted he wear. His gun belt was concealed beneath the jacket, the familiar weight of his Remington offering small comfort as his eyes continually scanned the entrances for any sign of Decker or his men. Sheriff Thompson and his 2 deputies circulated through the crowd, maintaining an appearance of casual attendance while remaining vigilant. Vincent had positioned himself near the main doors, ostensibly greeting late arrivals but actually screening each newcomer. You look like you're facing a firing squad rather than a dance, observed a familiar voice beside him. Nathan turned to find Violet, and for a moment, words failed him. She wore a deep green dress that complemented her chestnut hair, which was arranged in an elegant twist with soft tendrils framing her face. The gown was modest by the standards of Eastern fashion but beautifully fitted to her slender form. You look. He began, then shook his head with a rueful smile. I'm not sure there are words adequate to the task. A becoming blush colored her cheeks. Thank you. Mother insisted I dress the part, as she put it. Nathan's eyes dropped to her skirts, where he knew a specially designed holster held her Colt revolver. The plan required her to appear vulnerable, the perfect target for Decker's vendetta, while in reality being fully prepared to defend herself. Any sign of our unwelcome guests? She asked quietly, accepting a cup of punch from him. Not yet, Nathan replied, his voice equally low. But they'll come. Decker's too proud and too stupid to let this opportunity pass. The music started, a lively reel that quickly filled the dance floor with couples. Margaret Ashcroft, who had been conversing with the pastor's wife, caught Violet's eye and gave an encouraging nod toward Nathan. I believe we're expected to dance, Violet said with a hint of amusement. For appearance's sake, of course. Of course, Nathan agreed, offering his arm. Though I should warn you, I'm more accustomed to steering cattle than ladies around a dance floor. I'll take my chances, she replied, placing her hand on his arm. As they joined the other dancers, Nathan was acutely aware of Violet's proximity, the scent of lavender that clung to her hair, the warmth of her hand in his. For a few moments, he allowed himself to forget the danger that loomed, focusing instead on the remarkable woman before him. You're a better dancer than you let on, Violet commented as they navigated the steps with reasonable competence. "I have an excellent partner," he replied. The music required them to separate briefly, circling other dancers before rejoining. When they came together again, Nathan continued more seriously. "Violet, if anything happens tonight, don't," she interrupted firmly. "We have a solid plan. Everyone knows their role. Plans have a way of unraveling when bullets start flying," he warned. "Promise me you'll prioritize your safety over everything else." Violet's expression softened. "I could ask the same of you, Nathan Xavier. This isn't just your fight anymore." Before he could respond, a commotion at the main entrance drew their attention. 3 men had entered, their trail-worn appearance and armed presence creating an immediate ripple of unease through the gathering. The leader, a tall, lean figure with a pockmarked face and cold eyes, surveyed the room until his gaze locked on Nathan. "Decker," Nathan muttered, instinctively moving to place himself between Violet and the newcomers. Wade Decker sauntered toward them, his 2 companions flanking him at a slight distance. The music faltered and then stopped altogether as the dancers became aware of the tension unfolding. "Well, look who's playing gentleman tonight," Decker called out, his voice carrying across the now silent hall. Nathan Xavier, all dressed up with nowhere to run. Nathan stepped forward, keeping his voice level. "This is between you and me, Decker. Take it outside." Decker's laugh held no humor. "Oh, I don't think so. You embarrassed me in Texas, cost me my job and my reputation. Seems fitting I return the favor in front of your new friends." His gaze shifted to Violet, who had moved to stand beside Nathan rather than behind him. "Especially your pretty little girlfriend here." "Mr. Decker, is it?" Violet spoke up, her tone deceptively pleasant. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood the situation. Mr. Xavier and I are merely acquaintances." "That's not what folks around town are saying," Decker countered with a leer. "They say he's sweet on the lady sharpshooter. Say he can't take his eyes off you during that shooting contest yesterday." Nathan was aware of Sheriff Thompson and his deputies moving into position, as well as Vincent edging closer from the side. The plan was to contain the situation without endangering the townspeople, but Decker's unpredictability made that increasingly difficult. "Whatever you think you know, you're mistaken," Nathan said firmly. "Your quarrel is with me, not Miss Ashcroft or anyone else in this town." Decker's hand moved to rest on his revolver. "Maybe so. But hurting what a man cares about hurts him deeper than any bullet, don't it?" The tension in the room was palpable as Decker's fingers curled around the grip of his weapon. Several women gasped, and men began ushering their families toward the exits. "I wouldn't," Nathan warned, his own hand hovering near his concealed gun. Decker's eyes narrowed. "You always were fast, Xavier. But are you fast enough to stop all 3 of us before one of us puts a bullet in your lady friend?" "You assume I need Mr. Xavier's protection," Violet interjected, her voice steady despite the danger. In a movement almost too quick to follow, she reached through a specially designed slit in her skirt and drew her Colt, aiming it squarely at Decker's chest before he could clear his own weapon from its holster. Decker froze, genuine surprise registering on his face. "Well, ain't that something?" he muttered. "The rumors about you weren't exaggerated after all." "They rarely are," Violet replied coolly. "Now you have 2 choices. You can drop your weapons and leave Bentonville peacefully, or you can try your luck against a woman who hasn't missed a shot in longer than I care to remember." For a tense moment, it seemed Decker might actually back down. Then his eyes hardened, and he nodded slightly to his companions. "There's 3 of us and one of you, sweetheart. Even you can't shoot that fast." "She doesn't have to," Nathan said, revealing his own drawn weapon. At the same moment, Sheriff Thompson and his deputies leveled their guns at the other 2 outlaws, while Vincent emerged from the side with a shotgun trained on Decker. "You're outnumbered and surrounded," the sheriff announced. "Drop your weapons, nice and slow." Decker's face contorted with rage and frustration as he realized the trap he'd walked into. For a heartbeat, Nathan thought he might still try something desperate, but then the fight seemed to drain out of him. With a curse, he let his gun fall to the floor. His companions followed suit, clearly recognizing the hopelessness of their position. As the deputies moved in to secure the outlaws, the tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a collective sigh of relief. "You planned this," Decker spat at Nathan as his hands were bound behind his back. "Used the whole town to set me up." "No, Wade," Nathan corrected him. "You set yourself up the moment you decided to bring your vendetta to innocent people. All we did was make sure you didn't hurt anyone else." As the sheriff led the prisoners away, the townspeople began to recover from the shock, breaking into small groups to discuss the excitement. The band hesitantly resumed playing, and gradually, the dance continued, though with a decidedly different energy than before. Nathan turned to Violet, who was calmly returning her revolver to its hidden holster. "That was impressive," he said, admiration evident in his voice. "Which part? The quick draw or managing to do it in this restrictive dress?" she asked with a small smile. "Both," he admitted. "Though I was referring to your courage in facing down Decker when you knew how dangerous he was." Violet's expression grew serious. "We all did what was necessary. You were willing to face him alone to protect the town. I'd say that required equal courage." Nathan glanced around at the recovering celebration, at Margaret Ashcroft watching them with barely disguised hope in her eyes, at Vincent giving him a grudging nod of approval from across the room. "I've spent most of my adult life moving from place to place," Nathan said quietly. "Never staying long enough to form connections. Tonight made me realize what I've been missing." "And what's that?" Violet asked, her amber eyes searching his face. "Community, purpose, a reason to stay rather than always looking for the next horizon." He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Would you do me the honor of continuing our dance, Miss Ashcroft?" Violet's smile was like the sunrise, gradual, warm, and full of promise. "I thought you'd never ask, Mr. Xavier." As they rejoined the dancers, Nathan knew that his life had reached a turning point. The wandering cowboy had found something in Bentonville, Arkansas, that no trail or open country could offer: a sense of belonging, centered around the remarkable woman in his arms who could outshoot every man in town. In the weeks that followed, Bentonville gradually returned to its normal rhythm. Decker and his men were transported to Fort Smith to face federal charges for bank robbery and the shooting of Russell Blackburn, who was recovering slowly but steadily under the town doctor's care. Nathan sent word to his employer in Texas, explaining the circumstances and requesting an extended leave. To his surprise, the reply came with understanding and an offer. If he wished to remain in Arkansas, the ranch would consider him their permanent representative for future cattle sales in the region. The opportunity to establish roots while maintaining his connection to the work he knew best seemed providential. When he shared the news with Violet during one of their now regular evening walks, her delight confirmed what he already suspected, that his growing feelings for her were reciprocated. "So you're staying in Bentonville?" she asked, trying and failing to keep the hope from her voice as they strolled along the creek that wound behind the Ashcroft property. "It appears so," Nathan replied, watching a family of ducks glide across the water. "At least for the foreseeable future. Mr. Wilson has offered me the use of the old foreman's cabin on his north property until I can make more permanent arrangements." Violet nodded thoughtfully. "It's a good opportunity. Arkansas is growing rapidly, and more ranchers are looking to expand their herds." That's true, Nathan agreed, though I find myself increasingly interested in what Bentonville offers beyond business prospects. Their eyes met, and the understanding that passed between them needed no words. In the month since they'd first met at the shooting range, their connection had deepened from mutual respect to genuine affection to something neither was quite ready to name aloud but both recognized nonetheless. "Mother has noticed you call on us rather frequently," Violet mentioned with a smile. "She's already planning what flowers to plant around the cabin to make it more homely." Nathan laughed. "Is that her way of giving her approval? Mother has always been more progressive in her thinking than she lets on," Violet explained. "She may appear traditional, but she married my father knowing full well he intended to teach his daughter to shoot as well as his son. I think she sees something of their relationship in us." "I'd consider that a high compliment," Nathan said sincerely. "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man." "He was," Violet confirmed, her expression softening with memory. "He would have liked you, I think. He always valued honesty and courage above all else." They had reached a fallen log that served as a natural bench overlooking a bend in the creek. It had become their favorite spot over the past weeks, a place for conversations that ranged from childhood memories to future dreams. As they sat together in the golden light of the setting sun, Nathan gathered his courage for what he'd been planning to say for days. "Violet, there's something I need to ask you." She turned to him, her amber eyes curious. "What is it?" "When I first arrived in Bentonville, I was just passing through another town on an endless journey." He took her hand in his, marveling at how it could be both delicate and strong. "Then I saw you at that shooting range and something changed. I've been trying to understand it ever since." Violet's expression was open, patient, allowing him to find his way through words that didn't come easily to a man more accustomed to action than declaration. "I've come to realize that what changed was my understanding of what makes a life worthwhile," Nathan continued. "For years, I thought freedom meant having no connections, no responsibilities beyond the immediate job. But that's not freedom, it's just emptiness disguised as independence." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I know it's only been a month, and if you think this is too soon, I understand, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Violet's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond that caught the fading sunlight. "Violet Ashcroft, you've shown me what true courage looks like, not just in facing down danger, but in living authentically, despite what others may think. You've given me a reason to stop wandering and start building something meaningful." Nathan took a steadying breath. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Violet was still, and Nathan felt a flash of uncertainty. Then a radiant smile spread across her face, transforming it with joy. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure, just like her aim. "Yes, Nathan Xavier, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Nathan marveled at how perfectly it fit, like she was always meant to wear it, like he was always meant to find his way to Bentonville. And this remarkable woman, who had changed his life, with a single demonstration of her extraordinary skill. Their kiss was tender yet profound, a promise and a beginning wrapped in the golden light of an Arkansas sunset. When they finally parted, Violet's eyes danced with happiness tinged with mischief. "I do have one condition," she said. "Anything," Nathan replied without hesitation. "Our children, all of them, boys and girls alike, will learn to shoot." Her expression was playful but determined. "Family tradition, you understand." Nathan laughed, pulling her close again. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The wedding took place in October, when the Ozark foothills surrounding Bentonville were ablaze with autumn colors. The entire town turned out for the occasion, held in the white clapboard church on Main Street with a celebration afterward in the town square. Even Russell Blackburn attended, his near-death experience having softened his arrogance considerably. Nathan had spent the summer expanding and renovating the foreman's cabin into a proper home, with help from Vincent and other friends he'd made in the community. By the time of the wedding, it was a comfortable dwelling with a wide front porch that offered a view of the rolling pastures where the Wilson cattle grazed. More importantly, Nathan had built a shooting range on their property, complete with moving targets and a variety of challenges that he and Violet designed together. It quickly became a gathering place for friendly competitions and lessons, with Violet's reputation drawing people from across the region who wanted to learn from the woman who could outshoot every man in town. As winter settled over Bentonville, bringing snow and quiet evenings by the fire, Nathan and Violet established the rhythms of their shared life. Nathan's work representing the Texas ranch expanded to include advisory roles for several local cattle operations, while Violet continued to help her mother with the general store 3 days a week. On Saturdays, weather permitting, they still participated in the town's shooting competitions, sometimes competing against each other, sometimes working as a team in the increasingly elaborate scenarios Sheriff Thompson devised. Their good-natured rivalry became a favorite entertainment for the townspeople, with friendly wagers placed on which of them would prevail in each contest. "Does it bother you?" Violet asked one evening as they sat on their porch after a competition where she had narrowly outscored him. "That your wife regularly beats you at shooting in front of the entire town?" Nathan smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Bother me? Quite the opposite. I fall in love with you all over again every time I watch you aim." She nestled against him, content. "Even when I'm beating you." "Especially then," he assured her. "Your skill was what caught my attention that first day, remember? The precision, the focus, the absolute confidence. It was the most captivating thing I'd ever seen. And here I thought it was my charming personality," she teased. "That came later," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "About 5 minutes later, if I'm being honest." Their laughter mingled in the crisp winter air, a sound of happiness that seemed to echo across the land they now called home. Spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. As the wildflowers carpeted the hills around their property, Violet shared the news they had been hoping for. They were expecting their first child in the autumn. "Doctor says everything looks perfect," she told Nathan as they walked hand in hand through the orchard behind their house, apple blossoms drifting down around them like snow. "Though he did suggest I might want to curtail strenuous activities in the later months." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "And what did you say to that?" "I told him I would certainly consider his professional opinion," Violet replied with perfect innocence, then grinned. "Right after I reminded him that my mother continued to help run the general store until the day before both Vincent and I were born." "That sounds about right," Nathan laughed. "Though perhaps we could adjust the difficulty of the shooting course temporarily. No climbing or prone positions." Violet pretended to consider this with great seriousness. "I suppose reasonable accommodations could be made, temporarily." As her pregnancy progressed, Violet did indeed modify her activities, though she continued to demonstrate shooting techniques from a seated position even into her 8th month, much to the amazement of their regular students. Her mother visited often, bringing wisdom and practical advice along with hand-knitted baby clothes and family heirlooms for the nursery they prepared in what had once been a spare bedroom. On a crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Violet gave birth to a healthy son they named Thomas James Xavier Thomas, after Violet's father and James after Nathan's grandfather. From his first day, Thomas was surrounded by love and the legacy of two families now joined as one. "He has your eyes," Nathan whispered as he held his son for the first time, marveling at the tiny fingers that wrapped around his own with surprising strength. "And your determination," Violet replied, exhausted but radiant. He certainly wasn't in any hurry to make his appearance easy. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, it became clear he had inherited traits from both parents, Nathan's calm steadiness and Violet's quick intelligence. By his third birthday, he was already showing an interest in the shooting range, watching wide-eyed as his parents demonstrated techniques to their students. "Not until you're 8, Violet told him firmly when he begged to try holding a gun. "That was the rule my father set for me, and it's the rule we're setting for you." "But I'm strong now," Thomas protested, flexing his small arms to demonstrate. "Strength isn't the only thing needed for handling firearms safely," Nathan explained, kneeling to his son's level. "You also need patience and judgment, qualities that come with time." To distract him from his disappointment, they began teaching Thomas other skills: how to ride the gentle pony they bought for him, how to identify animal tracks in the woods, how to tie knots, and read the weather signs that were so important in ranch country. The family grew again when Thomas was 4, with the birth of a daughter they named Elizabeth Margaret Xavier. Unlike her brother's straightforward arrival, Elizabeth made her entrance into the world during a spectacular summer thunderstorm that knocked down trees and flooded the creek behind their property. "She certainly knows how to make an entrance," Vincent commented when he arrived the next day to meet his new niece, having had to clear fallen branches from the road to reach their home. "Takes after her mother that way," Nathan replied with a wink at Violet, who was resting in bed with Elizabeth sleeping peacefully beside her. "I prefer to think she's demonstrating an appropriate flair for the dramatic," Violet countered. "A useful quality in a woman who will undoubtedly have to make her mark in a world that still underestimates her sex." As the years passed, the Xavier home became known throughout the region not just for the exceptional shooting instruction offered there, but as a place where conventional boundaries were regularly challenged and redefined. Young women from surrounding counties sought out Violet for lessons in marksmanship and self-reliance, while Nathan's expertise in cattle management drew ranchers looking to improve their operations. Together, they raised their children, eventually 4 in total. With the additions of William, Vincent, and Catherine, rose to value skill over stereotype, courage over conformity, and respect for all people regardless of background or circumstance. On warm summer evenings, the family often gathered on their front porch after dinner, watching the fireflies rise from the meadow grass as Nathan told stories from his cowboy days, or Violet recounted tales of her father's time as sheriff. The children listened raptly, absorbing the family history that shaped their own identities. "Tell us again how you and Papa met," Catherine, their youngest, would often request, though she'd heard the story countless times. "Well," Violet would begin, her eyes meeting Nathan's across the porch, "it was at a shooting competition much like the ones we still have. Your father had just arrived in town with a herd of cattle. And then Mama beat all the men," Thomas would interject, now a teenager with his father's height and his mother's sharp eyes. "She certainly did," Nathan would agree, his voice still carrying the wonder of that first encounter. "She could outshoot every man in town, and I lost my heart watching her aim. It's so romantic," Elizabeth would sigh, a dreamy expression on her face that belied her practical nature. "It wasn't romantic at all," Violet would correct with a laugh. "It was a competition. The romance came later." "Not for me," Nathan would admit quietly. For me, it started the moment I saw you lift that Colt with such perfect confidence. I just didn't recognize it for what it was until later. On the 20th anniversary of their first meeting, their children organized a special shooting competition in their honor, inviting friends and family from across the region to participate or observe. The event had evolved considerably over the years, with categories for different age groups and skill levels, but the highlight remained the demonstration by Bentonville's most famous couple. Despite being in their 50s now, Nathan and Violet moved with the same fluid grace and precision that had characterized their earlier years. Their competition ended, as it often did, in a near tie this time with Nathan edging out his wife by a single point. "You let me win," he accused good-naturedly as they accepted congratulations from the crowd. "I did no such thing," Violet protested with mock indignation. "You earned that victory fair and square, though I may have been slightly distracted by that new grandchild of ours in the audience." She nodded toward Thomas and his wife Sarah, who stood nearby with their 6-month-old daughter cradled in Sarah's arms. The young family lived in a cabin on the Xavier property, with Thomas having taken over much of the management of what had grown into a substantial ranching operation. "A worthy distraction," Nathan conceded, his expression softening as he looked at their first grandchild. "But I know you, Violet Xavier. In 20 years of marriage, you've never once been distracted enough to miss a shot you intended to make." Violet's eyes danced with mischief. "Perhaps I simply decided that on our anniversary, you deserved a moment in the winner's circle." "And perhaps pigs will fly," he retorted, slipping an arm around her waist. Their banter was interrupted by Sheriff Edwards, the son of the councilman, who had once disapproved so strongly of Violet's participation in shooting competitions, and now one of their most enthusiastic supporters. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, approaching with a telegram in hand. "This just arrived for you, Mrs. Xavier. The operator said it seemed important." Violet thanked him and opened the yellow paper with curious fingers. As she read, her expression shifted from curiosity to shock to undisguised delight. "What is it?" Nathan asked, concerned by her reaction. "It's from the governor," she replied, her voice uncharacteristically awed. "I've been appointed to the State Commission on Firearms Safety and Training. They want me to help develop standards for law enforcement across Arkansas." Nathan's face split into a proud grin. "It's about time they recognized what we've known for decades. There's no one better qualified." The news spread quickly through the gathering, generating a spontaneous celebration that lasted well into the evening. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit around the shooting range, and the festivities continued with music, dancing, and more than a few demonstrations of skill inspired by the guest of honor. Later, when most of the guests had departed and their children had escorted the grandchildren home to bed, Nathan and Violet found themselves alone on their front porch, much as they had been countless evenings over the years. "Did you ever imagine this would be your life?" Violet asked, gazing out at the land they had cultivated together both literally and figuratively over 2 decades. Nathan considered the question seriously, as was his nature. "No," he admitted finally. "When I rode into Bentonville that day, I couldn't have conceived of any of this. I was a drifter, content with solitude and the next horizon. And now," she prompted, "now I understand that the greatest adventure wasn't crossing the next mountain range or fording the next river," he said, taking her hand in his. "It was building this life with you, raising our children, creating something lasting, making a difference in our community." Violet squeezed his hand, her amber eyes as bright and clear as they had been the day they met. "I'm glad you stopped to watch that shooting competition," she said softly. And I'm even more glad you stayed. Best decision I ever made, Nathan assured her. Though I'm still not entirely convinced you didn't let me win today. Violet's laugh rang out in the quiet night, as familiar and beloved to Nathan as his own heartbeat. I'll never tell, she teased. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. As the moon rose over their home, casting silver light across the land they loved, Nathan Xavier reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this moment. From a solitary cowboy with no fixed address to a husband, father, grandfather, and respected rancher with deep roots in the community, all because he'd been captivated by a woman whose aim was as true as her heart. And though he would never admit it aloud, he rather suspected she had indeed let him win today's competition, just as he had occasionally allowed her to edge him out over the years. Not because either of them needed to protect their pride, but because after 20 years together, they understood that sometimes the greatest victory was in the joy they could give each other. In the distance, a whippoorwill called, its haunting song floating on the night breeze. Violet leaned her head against Nathan's shoulder, and together they sat in the comfortable silence of two people who had no need for words to express what they felt. The cowboy who had lost his heart watching her aim had found something far greater than he'd ever imagined possible. And the woman who could outshoot every man in town had discovered that the truest mark of all was the life they had built together one day. One challenge, one shared victory